good evening, everyone. My name is Spyros Zenios. I'm a psychologist and a researcher. Tonight we will have an interview with Petros Patounas, a Lacanian psychoanalyst, and I will interview him on the topic of the gender and gender dysphoria. The interview title, as most of you know, is Polemics around the question of gender. Adam and Eve do not exist. So I'm gonna start with my first question. Gonna start with the title. What do you mean by Adam and Eve does not exist?
I chose that title because with the way this question of gender is being developed, especially in the Western countries, and even more specifically in the English-speaking countries, because this big question of gender, in the way it is developed, has been developed the last decade, but especially the last couple of years, it's in the English-speaking countries. What is happening? It's what is doing. It's the way they approach it. It's raising the differentiation between the sexes. Of course, by starting saying that the gender and the sex is different, but the line that separates the man and the woman is lost. So I chose that Adam and Eve do not exist is because this is the process. It's the line separating Adam and Eve is disappearing into that discourse around the genders. So there is a reference towards the one. Even the researchers, they speak, the way they approach the research, they speak about transgender people as one, as if it's one thing. And in my title also, I speak about American psychiatry and psychology, which personally I blame them for this confusion, because in the way they operate, they do not actually help people who suffer from or they have to deal with gender dysphoria or thoughts that they belong to a different gender. So I believe the core of, let's call it evil, as a figure of speech, starts from there.
How is this happening? Why it starts from there? What is the thing that is happening?
Because American psychiatry and psychology, even though maybe you know about it, but the APA standards of writing dissertations or quoting, they used to have the Oxford system, the Harvard system, and now everybody is just using the APA, the American Psychological Association. So they are so powerful that they even dictate you how to write your references in an essay, not only in psychology, but all departments. They have the book like it's actually thick. What is happening in American psychology and psychiatry? They have a pattern. Of course, they deleted, they erase. You can even say they try to kill psychoanalysis or even any other discipline that will offer people the opportunity to examine the structures in which their symptom or their wishes or demands are articulated. And because they are removing, and they totally remove psychoanalysis or psychotherapies of this sort that they were based on psychoanalysis, there is a formula in which they treat patients or approach different matters. It's behaviorism, CBT, medication, and if these things they don't work, they go to surgeries. In very rare cases, though, but this is a structure that exists there. So with gender dysphoria, it is not something that you can deal with CBT because it's not going to do anything with it. I mean, I'm sure they tried it. it is not something that will go away with medication, because what medication does is touching upon these secondary, how to call them, secondary symptoms. Yes, I feel like, let's say I feel that I'm a woman, but I'm depressed. So they will give you something for depression, but does nothing to help you understand this, I am a woman, in your context. Of course, they are not going to bring back psychoanalysis. So if medication doesn't work and CBT and behaviorism, they are not to apply, then the next stage they suggest it's surgery. And they base that on a lot of, they have a lot of research saying that there is a high amount of suicide. And that's true. And because they tried different methods related to CBT or conversion, they were falling under this conversion therapy. Like to try to manipulate your logic, or in Lacanian terms, to manipulate the signifier without understanding their conscious structures. And of course, the symptom, in this case, the demand that I belong to the opposite sex, in the example I gave earlier, persist. And by touching only this surface, and very little can happen. In the process, there were some methods that they were decent enough, but they also they were doomed as controlling or conversion therapies, including, I think it's Zucker, who had this method of watchful waiting. According to that method, it's, when there was such an articulation by a child that he or she belongs to the opposite sex, they advise parents or the doctor to be there watching, but without making a lot of interventions. And usually around the early teen years, about, I'm not really fan of the statistics, that, but about 70 or 80%, I think most of the researchers say 70, 80% of those kids, they stop having these demands or ideas that they belong to the opposite sex. And from the remaining 20%, a big chunk of it, they were, they express themselves as homosexuals, and an even smaller percentage as transsexuals. Well, this sort of method, which is not what I mean by saying investigating the conscious and unconscious structures, it was attacked fiercely by trans activists, because they say it's a false and a fake therapy, because you basically wait the child to confirm what you want him or her to confirm. But I totally disagree with that, because for two reasons. One is that they take the child outside of their environment. They take the child as an organism outside of influences that they might have. And second, a boy with a boy's body, if at the end of the day says I'm a boy, so it's closer to a way of naming his body in relation to the physiology of what is a boy. So they attack that let's call it treatment in many ways, but mostly they try to name it as a false freedom, that it was a way to manipulate the child, because you didn't leave it, you cannot leave it alone. But of course, we don't leave kids alone in this age to drive a car, to watch porn, to decide for other important things. And the funny thing is that there was a few years ago, there was the Americans, they do American things. They do what the Americans do, like sometimes very contradictory and sometimes quite stupid stuff. They were the most number of pediatricians, the biggest number of pediatricians, they are for this social transitioning, which is basically you introduce a child to a classroom. Oh, it's not John, it's Joanna. He wears a dress. I'm talking about transitioning from boy to girl or whatever. And then at the age of, at some age and around the teen years, they start the testosterone blockers. And then when they're about 18, they can have a surgery. And of course, if you get into this, you have a child that is confused, as we know from psychoanalysis that many times we are confused and our sexuality is confused, and who we are is confused, our identity. And we know that from working years with people. But if you got all this attention around you and you get into this structure, research says that 100% of the people who went into this, almost 100%, they went into surgery or changing their secondary and primary characteristics of their sex to resemble the other sex. So these pediatricians, the same pediatricians, just see the irony, because if you concentrate only on this topic, then you don't understand the contradictions in the American psychiatry, pediatry, and psychology. They had, I think it was a year ago, they have an announcement, and they were very serious about it, to speak about, to young kids about tattoos and how their body can be marked forever, but because of tattoos. But the same psychiatrists, they are pushing this, the pediatricians, they are pushing for this change on the body that they are even worse than tattoos. So for me, when I heard that, I heard about it, it was like a really bad joke. I was, are they serious about it? And they were very firm, like their association urged the pediatricians to speak to them about tattoos because of permanent change on their bodies. And in certain states, in the United States, but also in certain other countries, and this seems to be becoming the standards in the most, let's say, Western countries, in Europe, continental Europe, a couple of days ago, Germany and I don't remember which country was, Portugal. They had to vote for these things, and they voted against, but there would be a lot of push. So I was thinking about yes, there are some states that a girl can go when she's 12 or 13, I don't remember exactly the age, and she can remove her breast because she identifies as a boy. She needs a signature by her parents. And when she's 15, in those states, she can go and do it without the agreement of her parents. And about a month ago, we have this case in Canada that, because Canada, it's one of the leading countries into this stupidity. They arrested the father. I think he's put in jail for 6 months. He was divorced, and the mother, I think it was their boy. I don't remember if it was a boy or a girl, but it doesn't matter. Their child, the mother was said that I want to be on the opposite sex. I think it was a boy. Anyway, let's assume that's a boy. And the mother, of course, in that case, was supporting this transition, and the father was not. And he was refusing to call the child with the pronoun that he used, to be called she and whatever, some other things. They put him in jail. So the other thing that is happening to this discourse is you are removing the child from the context, and that's my argument. I'm not saying that this is good or bad as a psychoanalyst. Actually, I would say my opinion. I think it's one of the most stupid things that I ever encountered. I think it would be one of the darkest pages in psychiatry and in medicine, far worse than what we encounter in the past. Let's say if they want to go with it, I cannot comprehend that such a serious matter, it doesn't take, they don't take it into a conversation, like to actually speak with the child, even if it needs years to speak for years about it, to analyze the unconscious structure and the conscious ones, both of the child and the parents, in which this demand arises. How can you do that? For example, let's go to another fold of psychiatry, just to show its stupidity in this. Would you, if someone comes to you, let's say you are a psychiatrist or you are a psychologist, and comes to you and says, I have anorexia, they are like 33 kilos, but they tell you I feel they are 100 kilos. Will you tell them, yeah, let's just proceed with that, that's your feeling? They don't do the same, because the whole, of course, you know, I'm a psychoanalyst and I don't really go with this adaptation to reality, but I just want to show the faults there. Everything around psychiatry, especially psychiatry of the DSM, resolves around adaptation to reality. Okay, it's about reality and comparing this person's ideas or thoughts, whatever, to reality. This is how they make diagnosis. That's the basic thing. With this thing, with the gender dysphoria, they don't do it. Everything is based on a feeling. So if you've got an anorexic or somebody who is paranoid, you wouldn't go with that. They wouldn't treat it like that. Okay, so they have two different ways. I just want to show the contradictions in the way they approach certain things. The American Psychological Association, they've got, I think it's 30 pages of a manual how to treat things, but I will reduce it in very few points. You've got to do a few or whatever sessions with a child, but you are not allowed, at least in most in a lot of countries, but in a lot of states in the United States, you are not allowed to ask the child questions related to why. You are not allowed to investigate, like very basic psychotherapeutic questions, because they deemed this approach as sort of conversion therapy. You are not allowed to ask questions, but you have to ask questions around these things, like basic stuff. Why do you think you are a boy? I'm not saying that you have to push this girl to, to change. I mean, to do this conversion therapy, but to analyze the context. So you are just there like an idiot, just listening. And if the child insists, then after very short time, and I'll give you a parenthesis in that, in the average, because of that, in Tavistock, for example, the average, it's supposed to be more, but the average of meetings like the kids have is 5. And because they come, and this is from a psychoanalyst that used to work there for 20 years. So it's 5 meetings, and he said that the kids, they come there and they already know what to say. They're acting like robots, and they're pushing because they know, they are told, if you do this and that, then they will take you to the NHS to start this whatever therapies or transition. So the average the average meetings, it's about 5. That's a very serious matter, and they don't even bother. They don't even allow psychotherapists or psychoanalysts to explore why there is such demand in the child, in which context, their parents, what is happening. By the way, to say that since the 50s and even earlier, that slowly this phenomenon started. I saw some reports from doctors back then, and they said that the parents of those kids, they depicted borderline symptoms. Borderline personality disorder was not was later in the 70s, and it was constructed by Otto Kemberg. But then they had something else with the title borderline, and back then they said that the parents of these kids, they had these characteristics. Also, recent testimonies by psychoanalysts and psychotherapists that they used to work to Tavistock. Some of them they still work. Tavistock it's the only clinic dealing with these things in the UK. They said that a big number of the kids, I think they mentioned something closest to 40%, or some other specialists even greater numbers, they are in the autistic spectrum. And these psychotherapists and psychoanalysts, they are worrying because they are working with autism, and they know that if an idea is stuck into a kid's head, it's very difficult to change it. And a lot of promotion is going in around it, and it reminds me of the era, like, I don't remember, it was 20 years ago. In the 90s, it was the marketing was around depression. Everybody was depressed, and then it was about being anorexic, and because it was so much in the media, people working in clinics, they saw the numbers of anorexia or depression when it was a time of depression's advertising. They saw the numbers going up, and they were sure, they make their research, that it was transmitting through the from child to child. They were telling what to say. So we've got the same now. And we're at Tavistock Institute, they used to have like 10, 15 cases in a few years. If I tell you the number now, it's shocking. They have about 50, 60 per week, not 15, 20 for a few years. So, and the other thing that they have, that if you even search the literature, the previous literature about transgender or transgenderism, I was told recently that the word transgenderism is used by not fascists or Nazis or whatever, anti-trans. But why to deem a word racist? You know, it's as if you are putting somebody, it's either me or you are the opposition, which is, by the way, the main discourse around the trans activists and the trans movement. So what I wanted to tell you is that in the literature, it was very rare to find girls wanting to be boys, to go through transitions. Very rare. It was almost inexistent. Now it's the biggest demographic in the UK and probably the United States, with a percentage rising to I will tell you exactly, 4,400%, because this thing is pushed so much. Okay, then demand from almost non-existent, the last couple of years, is 4,400% more, and it's the biggest demographic in terms of kids, of people, usually kids wanting to change their gender or sex. The cases overall in the UK alone, they have 5,000% raise. Of course, when they speak in the statistics about biology, they try to attack you, because this is what they do. If you speak with a trans activist or someone who knows the research, they are so violent, they try to bring you the research there. Like, you have to bring, this is the research. Where is your evidence? Where this is evidence? This is the true science. How are you basing your own transition? Well, they don't include, for example, other types of science. The attachment theory, for example, is psychology. It's a proven scientific in the field of psychology. It's a proven theory that parents influence the mind of the child, and some psychologists, they see evidence, very powerful evidence of this attachment theory around and the way trans kids they operate with their parents. Of course, I told you about the high percentage of autism, but you will not see that in the research, because they like to put only whatever is suitable. You want to ask another question? Because I've got so many things to say, I could speak forever.
I have also a lot of questions, so yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Okay. One question came to my mind while you were talking. It was, I remember when I was in university, we were making a lesson 3 years ago, and the teacher brought up the a topic of, it was discussed in America then, if the kids should decide at 5 years of their age to have a surgery or not. And it was very extreme to hear this. and they had different opinions. And yes, what's your opinion on this?
Well, they base that on the way they push their research, because they like to speak about research. And of course, as a psychologist and as a researcher, you know that you can, the statistics, you can interpret them in various ways. Even the researchers that they said that people with the transition, they have still a high, 10 times more percentage. Trans people have like about 41, some cases 45% suicide rate, which is 10% more than the average of population. So, but they say, oh, it's because of the society. And then they say a lot of the kids, we could save more kids from suicide if we help them transition early. There are some kids that, some people that they transition, they're okay with it, but they are doing what Foucault does. Foucault introduces this method, he called it the archaeology, which is basically he was turning everything upside down. But the first thing he does is to subtract psychoanalysis from his methods. He's discarded psychoanalysis, maybe because of what psychoanalysis was saying about his own sexual preferences, his bondage stuff, and him being gay, which is fine. I mean, it's his own bet. So he attacks psychoanalysis and he foreclosed psychoanalysis. So when you take out the possibility of investigating the conscious and unconscious structures around something, then what you have, it's facts, but without their structures. So what they have is, instead of analyzing in the way Lacanian psychoanalysis does, or in a different other way, why this kid wants to be trans, but to actually analyze it, not to stand there like idiots, because you shouldn't say anything. And I forgot how they call it, affirmative, just to have this neutrality around them. But what sort of therapist, what sort of psychotherapist you are, or psychoanalyst? You have to ask questions. And this is how the child will be helped. I had these cases a lot. And if the child and the parents, they wouldn't speak because I ask them specific questions, the kids will have a horrible continuation. So they say, if we can go back and stop this suicide and this bullying that they will go early on, what could we do? So they start figuring out these ways that they started in Holland, by the way. It was brought from Holland to the United States. People think that it's from the United States that it started, but we've got more idiot scientists in Netherlands than in the United States. So somebody imported that, in America they do business. So they imported these methods that let's go and catch it when it's early on. So they are trying to change it in order to avoid suicide. And if you get into an argument with them, they will keep mentioning suicide. Like they try to put on you that if you don't accept that idea, then kids might die. Okay, but let's go back to psychiatry again to see how they operate with double standards. If somebody suicides, I will tell you a story. Like somebody was in love with a girl, and the girl, he asked her out, and the girl gently refused. And the next day he suicide. So should we blame the girl? Should we blame the girl for this person's suicide? Why in this case we want to change the whole context, even if they say that people suicide? Why we don't consider that there is something, that some sort of confusion, I'm not going to say illness or something, but there is something in this kid, because if your body, it's the body of the man with the organ of the man, and then you see that you are a girl, so there is something there that removes or forecloses the separation of the sexes imposed by the bodies, by biology itself. Okay, so and this is very different from even the Lacanian question of hysteria, am I a man or a woman? That question is a conscious. That question is not conscious. If it's conscious, then we're talking about something else, far more serious. Or a man who can operate like a woman, that's still a conscious. And this sort of people, they don't doubt. Like if you ask them, say, I'm a man, there is no confusion. Okay. And another thing that is confusing, they reduce everything of the research into trans. Okay, this is about trans. They speak about all sorts of trans together, about the suicides and all this stuff. But they got, for example, in the UK, I think it's almost 100 different genders. Some of them are called with very weird names, like double spiritual, something like that. I don't even remember them. So if on one hand you've got all these 100 genders and they are multiplied, they seem to multiply. So how can you speak about research done on trans people when themselves they are separated into all these groups? Why you include them all in trans? Do they have the same characteristics? No, some of them they want to be a man, that they want to be trans women. You've got women, they want to be trans men. You've got others that tell you they're not binary. You've got others, they have this, and just name it. It's 100 different sexes. So why you speak about this research and you try to bring them as evidence when they speak about one trans, the semblance of a trans, and then you've got 100 different trans people?
Yes, and a lot of times these people end in psychiatry and psychology. They different sex from the gender and the sexual orientation, and this kind is very confusing for the rest of the people who are not in the LGBT community. Why do people do that? Does it have any function to differentiate the sex, gender, and sexual orientation?
I personally, I don't. I think it's very stupid. It started in the 70s that they start telling the doctors. It started from the feminists, I think, the feminist movement, but I'm not sure about it. And when they were using the word sex, they told them, no, you have to use the word gender. But the word gender was also more polite instead of using sex. This I got it from one of the, I think it was until 2 years ago, the president of American Pediatric Association. So for me, I don't really separate it. For me, there is the sex, and then the man and the woman. For me, there are only two genders. Okay, just to say now, this is my personal opinion. And the how, let's say this is the sex. For me, then gender is the how. And this is what the Oedipus is teaching us, how to be a man and how to be a woman. Okay, so I can have the body of a man, I can operate as a man, I think of them as a man, but in my conscious structures, I take the position of the woman in the structures and the way I was formed by language. But that doesn't make me trans. That's in their conscious. So for me, then gender, it's the how I develop that, how to be a man in the world. That's the gender for me. Okay, so there is a sex. If you want to say there is a gender, then gender is the how the sex is evolved. Okay, why they do it? There are some people, they say that they have psychiatric issues. There is a big community supporting that, especially by conservatives. There are other people, especially liberals and these sort of people who try to place this. I would call it a cult. I will tell you why in a minute. They try to place it on the level of the human rights, as if it's the last frontier of human rights, and they tell you that 20, 50 years ago the gay people were in the same position, or 80 years ago black people were. No, they were not. None of them was trying to change the very basic structures of the world. Their problem there was not a problem of not being able to name your body or try to name their body differently. They wanted the way they were to be introduced in the society without naming you, for example, a cis male. I don't like it when they tell me I'm a cis male. I said I'm a male and you are a trans male. You want to change, not me. Okay. For example, in India, they acknowledge a third sex. Okay. They are not acknowledged a third because in India, even in their religion, but they have a very long tradition with different genders. Someone said they have about 1,000 genders in their, in their history and myths. But everything is put under one category, and nobody had a problem because they say we are the third category. Simple as that. But now it's not enough in the Western world. No, I want to be a woman still having my penis and go to women's toilet. You see, there is no spirituality there. There is a conflict. The way this problem is situated in the Western world is by creating an adversary and trying to attack that adversary, taking the position, the identification of the activist. And I would dare to say that this is the best surgery they can have. This is the best way to stabilize. As long as there is an adversary, as long as they feel that they are threatened or attacked, it stabilizes them. And it's funny because even in very democratic countries, I know they've got some weird laws, especially some states in the United States against transgender, but that should change because not only because of transgenders, but the laws shouldn't allow anybody attacking anybody else. It's very simple. It doesn't have to be focused on the transgender. But let's go back to the research. They say, okay, there is high suicide rate, but it's because of the society. It's because of the bullying. It's because of the attack. They blah, 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 blah. And this research was about, it's very similar researchers in the most developed nations in the world. Okay, so they say, okay, we change. It's as if we blame the society for what is happening to some person. Why they don't look inside these people, as I said earlier, even from young age, to see, because for me, if a boy wants to be a girl, it's a sign of his stability. Okay, we have to be able to investigate that, but you cannot say anything. You cannot even touch these cases. They everything now became like this sort of therapies that they are trying to change you, which of course, if you push, they were pushing the boys or the girls to change their sex. And because it was, in psychoanalytic terms, it was the only imaginary identification they had. When it was collapsed, of course, they approached suicide. Yes, you can bring another question if you want.
Okay. Some people that they are a certain gender or sex and they feel the opposite. Some people identify themselves as gay or lesbians, and others choose to be trans and make a surgery and stuff.
Yeah.
Why the one does this and the other does the other? Why don't they identify as gay and they go to the trans?
Because they will tell you that the gay is about their sexuality and the trans is about their gender identity, whatever, blah, blah, blah. By the way, just a paragraph, it started another trend now. They call it racial identity. And you see American white guys identifying as Filipino. Well, that's the next thing. That's the next thing. It will take over. Okay? So pay attention to that. That's the next thing. It's two different things. It's two different things. There is no problem in my head. There is no problem if someone wants to change his sex or whatever, gender, something else. What is my issue and what is my worry is to, even with the statistics and this research, they say, oh, it's better if we do it early on in life because of bullying and stuff. I don't believe that. I actually, in the beginning, I was thinking when they were 18, but when you are 18 years old, you don't really have exposure to life. So if it was me, I would do it on the 25. Get out in life, to experience something, to learn more of yourself as an adult, and then take such a very serious decision. My problem is with this idiocy that started from United States and then England is following. Like, I don't know why they are following so much. I mean, maybe England will become even more damning with these things. You know, they don't even check the parents. They don't even analyze the structures. And immediately they go to hormone therapies, they go to this stuff. But these are serious matters. These are serious matters. And like, it's like the question, what do I want to do with my life? You cannot answer that with biology. You cannot answer that with medication. Okay, you need to explore. You need to be asked questions. You need to analyze. Why don't they offer that to the same kids? Why they don't do it? If you take this outside of the equation, then the whole amount of research that they did is wrong. Because you remove that and then you do research and then you come in my face saying, oh, but this is the research, this is science, but it's the most basic thing. Did you analyze the structures, conscious and unconscious? That conscious is not even mentioned there. So why some of them become gays? I don't know. It's I tell you, one is about the expression of their sexuality and the other one is about their gender identity. That's what we'll tell you. I consider more confused and more troubled the people who have issues with their gender identity. Because if a boy likes men, the boy likes men. Nothing wrong with it. Okay? If a girl likes women, they like women. But then if you see your body and you've got the body of a male and you want to suicide if you don't have a surgery, then there is something quite serious there. I'm referring to this Hollywood actor that she's became an activist now. She says that the surgery saved her life because she wanted to look herself with a towel around and just look her chest and feel like a boy. I wanted many things, but you know, it's just became so easy, you know, like it became a situation of the last 10 years, 15 years, the young generations, they are used to play these video games. It reminds me of that you just take your character, you change your skin, you change everything. Everything is they behave as if it's a video game and you just change your character and your thing. And there are even laws that say if you can be a woman for 2 days and then if you change back again, you are just a man again. What's that? I mean, these things are serious. It's not just, you know, playing hide and seek. Let's proceed to another question.
Okay, I'm gonna speak about gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a disorder that is listed in the DSM and describes in general people who experience intense, persistent gender internal dissonance. Some believe that is not ethical because it pathologizes the trans people, and some others not. What's your opinion on this?
Well, they used to call it gender disorder, I think, but then they remove it and they call it now gender dysphoria, and they have a protocol, but they will have difficulty removing it because, I mean, they change it. The activists, they managed to change it. So it's there in the DSM, but it's not really considered, it's not a disorder as it used to be called. It's a dysphoria. Why it will stay there for longer until they manage to put it under a different sort of a medical book, maybe a book belonging to, I don't know, cardiologist or something. Because under Obama, for example, if you wanted to do this, you needed, of course, you know, under Obamacare and all these insurance companies, they needed diagnosis to get you go through this, to have your breast removed and have all these other surgeries. So without this psychiatric diagnosis, you wouldn't get it for free. Okay, but if you pay attention, you are a psychologist, a researcher, pay attention to how the DSM, that's another fault in the DSM, and it's becoming a Mickey Mouse diagnostic manual. I mean, for me it was anyway, but for the reason I told you, that they never investigate the context and the conscious and unconscious structures of someone, okay? But let's say something that it has its own place in the world. Pay attention how they describe and how they approach gender dysphoria, and pay attention how they approach anorexia. Because there you've got a claim that I am fat, I'm obese. But nobody leaves them to have this belief. Okay? Because they might die, but you know. So pay attention how the two are described there, and you will see a double standard.
You as a psychoanalyst and any other psychoanalyst, how can you help these people, the trans people who question their identity and all this stuff?
Well, I would tell you, actually, I was blessed to have quite a few people of different ages that either, you know, some of them turn to trans and some others not. My favorite example is, I would just give it, I said many times, because this mother who, before visiting me, she visited, I think it was 5 psychologists and psychiatrists, and she spoke about her child, and he liked to play with dolls, and he was behaving, you know, he was saying, I'm a girl, I want to be girl. This typical thing. Was very persistent, and then they told her about me, and she came. Only 20 minutes of conversation. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I just made one intervention that changed her mind. I told her, you spoke about 3 generations of people in your family, 3 generations of women. You told me about the grandfather, how strong she was and how she tortured your grandfather. You told me about your mother beating with a pan your father. You told me about you deciding to get married, and one of the reasons was that your husband is weak and you will do whatever you want. So of course your boy will not want to be in the place of the man, because in all your family, for 3-4 generations, the men are suffering. So we know from psychoanalysis that identifications, at least the basic ones, they go towards the strong. If the mother, for example, is foreclosing or forbidding access to the father, the child will identify with the mother's ways. So this is textbook. This is very basic. You don't even have to be a psychoanalyst. If you pay attention to a family, you can understand that. But obviously, psychologists and psychiatrists, especially in the United States, they are far behind this. I don't know, they consider them outdated, but they should open their mind a lot. So when I make that intervention to her, she just clicked. And she understood that the child expressed that demand that I want to be a girl in this history, in this context that was around the family. And not only she took her child in analysis, but she also accepted herself to be in analysis. Well, we had a very good results, because the child said at some point, well, I'm not. Then he was removed from the I'm a girl. He went to sometimes girl, sometimes a boy, and then he went without the psychoanalyst telling him anything, without just intervening in, sometimes without words, on the game we are playing. And then he says, I'm a boy, sometimes I'm a lion. So the girl was removed. So now the boy is identified as a boy. And not only that, he says to his mom, I think it's time for you to find a boyfriend. And she says, how to find him? Well, I would tell you the way I choose girls. Look at their face if they are beautiful. So when he said that, I knew the boy was in a proper orientation. He was disconnected, not from being a trans, but from the stories and the structures asphyxiate him of his family. Okay, because we don't approach it to change it. We don't have an ideal, especially Lacanian psychoanalysis. We don't have an ideal to remove the child from whatever he says to try to make him a man or a woman. It happened that I had analysis with other people, short or long. Okay, some of them they chose to proceed, some of them not, but at least they make the effort to analyze what they wanted. Those who went through a nice analysis, who took actually quite some time, they found peace in one way or another. If you ask me, a big chunk of them, they separated from their idea. But even those who went on to transition, they did it after a few years of analyzing in depth this, I want to be a woman, I want to be a man, you know? They analyze it and they assume responsibility, and they were very comfortable with it. And that's different from the 5 sessions of giving to the kids. And having said that, we know, everybody knows that the kids, sometimes they express, not sometimes, most all times, they express things that their parents want them to express, consciously or unconsciously. So how many studies, at least not even one, how many studies, for example, in these idiots that they bring you all this research in front of you, and they are so sure about it, have happened. Some of them are your colleagues, psychologists, and they say, oh, we have analysis and subjective analysis for this child and this context, and we even have analysis of his parents, and in this context, nobody does that. As if everybody's alone. I have to repeat again, by the time that you remove the subjectivity of each case, then all the research that is done by far is useless. That's why I don't like to quote research. I was in a forum last couple of days and an argument with different arguments. I didn't mention not even our research. I was accused, and I just posed that why we don't put the kids into this, to analyze the context. From the moment you don't do that, then all your research is phony. It's a research that doesn't take into consideration the specificities of that boy or of that girl. Let's proceed with another question.
Okay.
Well, before you go, I'll give you just an important statistic just to see how fashionable that became. In 2007, there was only one pediatric trans clinic in the United States. Do you know how much there are now in 2021? 300. Okay, so it's becoming a trend.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Okay. So how current discourse around gender and gender dysphoria expose structural faults in the reasoning of American psychiatry and psychology?
Well, in the reasons I tell you, they don't analyze the context of the child. They don't take into consideration their conscious. They don't take into consideration their conscious structures of the child, of the parents. And the fault that is exposed is that they have removed psychoanalysis, they have removed subjectivity, they have removed the ability of the doctor or the psychologist to think for themselves. And there is this pattern. It's CBT, medication, behaviorist. If it doesn't work, surgery. That's the fault. They don't even consider, because some people say, even for this watchful waiting technique, which is not psychoanalytic, they attacked it. The clinic closed, even though they had a 80% success. I mean, success. It was they were just making space for the child, and the child, in the early teen years, probably as a psychoanalyst, I would say, when he was exposed to something outside of the family structure, to other boys and girls, decided to enter the other social structures. But they accuse that as being one of these sort of therapies who force beliefs onto kids. So this is what I keep repeating. This is the faults. Examples I gave you with anorexia. Just pay attention how they treat that and how they approach this matter.
Like how you describe it, it's like the behaviorism in psychology, in its core, it's a fault, because they don't, like in what I was taught in the university, which was American style, they are teaching. It was like unconscious does not exist because we cannot measure it, and everything that can be measured shall be objective, not subjective. So as you described, it's like in its core, it's
yeah. Well, actually, you cannot measure it comparing it with what? If you have a clean ear and if you are trained to listen to their conscious, of course you can find evidence for their conscious, but what are these evidence? The process of psychoanalysis is to discover the truth, okay, which is very scientific. This is the purpose of science, to discover your truth and do something with that truth. This is what I add in to perform your act. So, but it's a truth based on you. It doesn't have to be universal, because behavior is function with the one man, the one woman, the one person, the one brain. Okay, so this subjectivity, it harms the specialist. It harms the idea of the specialist, because you cannot be a specialist if the subjects that you have in front of you, trans or not, to approach with their difficulties or challenges in life, are a subjective topology for you. It means that you are not a specialist. So I believe what they are afraid more than anything is this idea of the specialist.
Okay. I'm moving on to something else. Okay, I was thinking that there are some LGBT movements in countries that have already accepted the society of LGBT. Why do these people still trying to make a revolution in countries like France that they have already accepted them and help them be accepted from the society? Like if it was in India or like a more Asian countries, I don't know if I.
Okay, yes.
You get the meaning. Okay.
The argument that they will tell you, these activists or whatever, trans activists, it's a stupid one in my opinion, because they will speak. For example, I spoke with a professor. I told him, why do you keep gay people together? Why do you have an association that is gay people and trans? One is about sexuality, and the other, gay people, and you, including you, he's my friend. It's you don't doubt if you are a man or a woman. You are a man, but your sexuality is expressed in a different way than straight people. And if you speak with a professor of psychology, probably you know that, they will tell you, oh yes, they should belong together because they are also victims of races, and there is institutional racism. They will, of course, quote their own Bible. The research shows that there is institutional racism, and that's why these people, they should stick together. So institutional racism, I don't believe that this exists. I think some among the even more stupid, idiotic, how they call it, research. They say that, for example, in the UK or England or Sweden, let's take these countries, there is institutional racism. What does it mean, institutional racism? If you or me are racist? No, it means that if there are the mechanics, okay, that me and you, we go against the legislation. If there are laws or structures within the laws of this country that we approach and we attack specific groups of people. And of course, in the United States, for example, there are racist people, but there is no this organized thing within the law. Okay, maybe some group of people, they are organized, but there is a law that forbids that, and you can find your right. So we cannot speak about this structural and institutional racism existing. But their argument is, oh, suicides, the society is to blame. Because there is institutional racism, we have to change the society. And listen to this I think this is if I have to choose only one stupid thing, I mentioned the word stupid today a lot, but if I choose the most stupid thing for today is this. There is this private school in New York. They pay like 50,000 euros per semester. That's a high school. And it's very open-minded, very liberal, and they start with it. And they believe that because you are white, because someone is white, it's racist. And they make their kids like recite a prayer that they feel sorry that they are white and they are not. You understand? Kids, they didn't do anything. It's a whole system of United States that they're trying to promote this democracy all over the world, equality. It was the last country that they acknowledged the rights of black people, for example. Okay? And of course, we know what's happening with their words. They are the last people to speak about human rights and democracy at the United States and the UK, because they fucked up the whole world with their words. Just take the last 20 years, what they did. Obama, for example, he they gave him the Nobel Prize, and he did 7 wars. And there is no other president in the United States that initiated 7 wars, small or big ones. So he has the Nobel Prize. So let's go back to the institutional races. So that's what they say. And then they put them into this group of people. Okay. They are all together against institutional races. Again, if you pay attention, I keep repeating the position of the adversary, that someone is against them. That's the only way for some of these people to stabilize themselves. I repeat that this is the metaphorical surgery. They need to stabilize their mentality, a lot of them.
But is that way good for society and even them?
For them, it's what it is for them. I mean, this is my argument now is not to be an adversary for them. But my argument for this interview was that they don't even in. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be whatever they want to be, but at least to get the best support possible, because this is what psychiatry and psychology are attempting to do, I assume, to give them the best support as possible. But they don't get it in this way. That's why I'm bringing in the conscious and the structures. But if you bring in the conscious and the structures, then the other ways that they are doing, they will fail. Okay, because a lot of activists, they don't want these things. They don't want things to be invested. They want things to happen fast. Another thing that I should mention is that there is a very big dropout from the studies, the long-term studies they do. Some cases they mention 30%, some others 50%, because they have to follow the transition of transgender people. And even though academic university research say that those who have long surgery long time ago, they have less psychiatric difficulties or issues, because this is, of course, another thing that we see with trans people. They are more prone to depression, more prone to have other psychiatric stuff. And of course, again, research says it's because of the society and their families don't want them, and the blah, 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 blah. Nobody wants them. The same story. But you cannot force somebody like somebody else if they don't like them. And the best answer I heard was by a British transsexual, who, of course, he's accused. He says, well, he became a woman, so he's calling himself a trans woman. He says, well, trans women are men, including me. He says, my kids call me daddy, so for them I'm a daddy. He says, if I work at night and I'm alone, and so I wear my hoodie in my coat, and I walk like a man, because if they see a figure who is like a man, they will not attack him. And he says that I don't have a problem if the people misgender me. I became a woman because I feel good with myself. I don't care. If they want to call me man, they can call me man. And that's the only one I heard that is, he spoke. He's a physics teacher, actually, and his discourse was holding on very well. He says that he had a lot of psychological issues. He says that he believes that all of trans people, they have psychological issues. He says that this doesn't make him a proper woman. That's why he was attacked. So, but he was the most comfortable transition trans woman I met or I ever heard. He was so cool. And he was very okay with what he was. He didn't care about anything. And this is the discourse that you will not find in the movements or in other trans. They constantly want to feel the victim, even the research. So in the research, they will not tell you that in the long term. No, in those research, they tell you, yes, there's more stability if they had surgery 20 years ago. Well, there are other research that I cannot quote right now, but there are some videos. If anybody is interested for the research, I can send them. And those specialists there, they mentioned them. that there is a dramatic rise in suicide after the initial years of transitioning. Because the first year of transitioning, there is this excitement, whatever, but the dramatic rise is after. It's and this is important because it is after their adaptation to the social bond. Okay?
Even if we see them as they see themselves like victims, because I'm sure that they are being bullied, they go to suicide.
Of course,
they do that. What can we do to reduce the abuse and bullying that these people is very common to experience?
My opinion is very simple. Like, as you don't.
I cannot hear you, Petros.
Can't hear you, Petros.
We still cannot hear you. Maybe a cable was unplugged. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, well, as you see, someone who is obese, someone who is has special needs, okay?
Yeah.
Someone who is, dressed like a rapper, just anything. I don't have to, I'm not, or me, I have a lot of earrings and stuff. As you shouldn't make fun of me because I wear this, the way I dress. Why to attack us? Or there are laws, there are laws. It doesn't have to be trans or gay or Petro specific. If someone is attacking you, you have to be able to go to. So this is what we can do, and it's human. What we don't have to do is to try to change the way society is speaking, to enforce pronouns, okay, and to enforce all this stuff in our kids, while and it's stupid, do we allow them to make big decisions for their future? No, when they're 5, 6 years old. Why do we allow them? Why we don't investigate? Why we are so cool with that? To say, if a boy wants to be a girl, to say, I'm a girl, and it's fine with it. That's another of the points showing of the medical establishment, psychiatry and psychology, their stupidity into this. But let me finish about there is a big number of dropouts from the long-term research. And in many cases, when they were tracked down, it wasn't because they were having this beautiful life. They were in a really bad stage. They couldn't follow up. They were doing really bad. Okay, so I will speak about something again. If the adversary is removed by this discourse, a lot of these people will collapse.
Okay.
And another thing, because you asked me earlier about psychology, although the psychiatric emphasis is mostly on DNA, biological factors, chemicals, and behaviorism, when it comes to genders and the suicide rates, it says that it's environmental causation. A claim that is falsified by a few Swedish studies and also by our psychoanalytic practice. If someone wants to come to psychoanalysis and they tell me, oh, this person it doesn't allow me, I want to say divorce from him, but he doesn't allow me, I'm not going to have psychoanalysis with the other person to stop bullying you. I will have psychoanalysis with you to learn how to deal with that, to be comfortable with who you are. Yes,
okay. Like a few days ago, I was scrolling in Instagram and I saw a video like this TikTok, but on Instagram, and I was showing a very beautiful woman wearing a mini dress. It was a very beautiful woman, and there was a guy there pointing out, this guy's a dude. And then another video switched in the same video and says, this is our problem with the society, that because he exposed that woman who was a man before and stuff. And I was very like, I couldn't accept that it's a problem of society. He just pointed out that it was a dude. What I want to say to you, like, if a man is straight and wants to date a straight woman, a lot of times trans people may appear as a woman, but they show later who they are. And this sounds like a problem to me. And I observe from other people saying that, and they're afraid of that.
Yes, well, it's the discourse of these activists and a lot of trans people. And not only that, it's psychologists, they do that. It's a big amount of people they are involved into this. For example, if you say, I was speaking with psychologists and he's working in the UK, and he almost called me racist but he didn't, because we know each other. But I could see he was taking it to that point that I wouldn't date a trans woman. I mean, if let's say it wasn't me, but if it was somebody else, and I told him, why don't you date white women? Is it because I like black women? You don't have to explain that. Why people are labeled racist because they wouldn't like to date the trans women. There are people who liked to do that. Okay. By the way, to tell you that about 80% of trans people, they don't have surgery.
Okay.
So you've got a phenomenon with people identifying as women. They are acknowledged as women legally in many countries, but they have a penis. So you've got new species. I mean, the penis doesn't play now a part to separate, which is, if you see two naked bodies, it's man and a woman, but then they will tell you that's biology. The sex is something else. The sex is something else. It's something that it's more spiritual. It's a social constructed thing. Well, what is socially constructed? I totally disagree with that view. What is socially constructed, and at the same time consciously constructed, it's the how to be a man and how to be a woman. Okay? Even if they want to change, to remove everything and have like a million whatever things, they have to come and at the binary of the body. At the end of the day, you have to face the binary of the body. Even if you change the name man or woman, whatever, at the end, even the people who say we are not non-binary, they are non-binary because there is a binary. Yeah. So everything is established on that. So yeah, it's a big mess.
Can those people who have a surgery from man to woman have children?
They have. I read an article, it was a few days ago, but it was funny, from a journal that was supporting the trans activists, saying that the first man who gave birth, and I look at the picture, it was, I mean, you could understand that it was a lady taking testosterone and whatever. She had beer, whatever, but she had all the reproductive organs. Or now you've got women having prostate cancer, because they are men. So yeah, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a woman, a man, the first man in the world giving birth. For them it was, and they got upset with me that I said it's a woman. It's a woman. It's the body of the woman. I mean, if she had beer or whatever, it doesn't make. I mean, you have reproductive organs. Yes, you can say whatever you want about yourself, but men cannot have. They cannot give birth, or men cannot bleed, because there was another issue with the tampons in the supermarkets, and there was a whole thing, and now they start naming in some countries people who bleed. Men don't have periods, biologically don't have periods, but they say, but I'm a man and I have a vagina, so I'm a man who bleeds.
Okay. Before you said that only that small percentage they do surgery.
Let me quote you something, because I said earlier, I just remember one of the sources. I would try to say it as much as it was in the Guardian. I think it's in the UK. Penny, correct me. I think the Guardian is in the UK. It's a newspaper. Of particular concern are the people in these studies that we lost track of. As the Guardian noted, the results of many gender reassignment studies are unsound because researchers lost track of more than half of the participants. So all this research that they are trying to push in your face and they act like the best academics, they don't really say everything. Indeed, Dr. Hyde said the high dropout rate will reflect high levels of dissatisfaction or even suicide among post-operative transsexuals. And that's in the Guardian, okay? It spoke about the research. I'll take another quote related to that, because this is something that they never mention. Or if you mention it, they will bring something else to tell you that this is lies. When the term out and shouting dies, it proves not easy nor wise to live in a counterfeit sexual gap. The most thorough follow-up sexual reassignment people extended over 30 years and conducted in Sweden, where the culture is strongly supportive of the transgender, documents their lifelong mental unrest. 10 to 15 years after surgical reassignment, the suicide rate of those who had undergone sex reassignment surgery rose to 20 times that of comparable peers. Of course, they have their own way to destroy, to attack, to attack this evidence. Another quote: the medical evidence suggests that sex reassignment does not adequately address the psychosocial difficulties faced by people who identify as transgender. Even when the procedures are successfully technically and cosmetically correct, and even in cultures that are relatively trans-friendly, transitioners still face poor outcomes. Because they don't even consider of analyzing these unconscious structures in which this articulation appears. I want to change my gender.
What if they regret it? Can they change it back?
Actually, there is more and more now. I cannot say statistics. I'm really poor with that. But I see in some, some things that I follow, the number of people that they retransition. They say it's fine, but it's not. Because let's say I took this medication for 3 years and I had my testosterone blocked as a teenager, whatever, and I was operating with my peers as a girl, and then I changed. These 3 years, they cannot come back. There is something lost from the body, but from my mentality of being, in the world. So yes, I can. There are people that they retransition, some of them, especially if they haven't had the surgery, but there is something lost there. Of course, there are people who went all the way and they had the surgery and they wanted to retransition after that. And of course, it was impossible because they lost their penis or whatever. But quite a few of them, they went to psychoanalysis, not therapy. They went to psychoanalysis, and they were feeling okay with what happened. They found different causes in life. One of them actually speaks against the medicalisation and the giving testosterone blockers to kids and surgery.
Okay.
Well, if you ask the pro-trans and the, and all this medical whatever establishment supporting that, they tell you, yes, it's fine. You just stop the medication, you go back. I mean, they are so serious. I'm telling this ironically. I tell you, yeah, you just stop it and you go back. Why? Because for them, the man and the woman, it's an organism. That's why they took all this in the Olympic Committee. They took all these documents, and what they said there, that it's equal. The women athletes are equal to the men who want to be women, the trans women athletes. And they say if you give them for 1 year testosterone blockers, they are on the same level, which are not. Basically, other research shows that they are not. They are still stronger. So the way they speak about the man and the woman, it's about an organism, not even an organism. They speak about the chemicals. They don't speak about the organism because the penis doesn't matter anymore. It's what matters are the chemicals inside your body. So we've got another orientation of this medical psychiatric establishment or this sort of activists that they speak about a new human being, a human being of the chemicals. It's not even an organism. Okay, it doesn't matter if your organism belongs to a man or a woman. But if we change these hormones, these things, these chemicals inside your body, this is you can identify, let's say, as a woman if you are a man, and you can go to participate in the Olympics, as it will happen this year. Yes.
Okay. Some people that start doing this transition with the chemicals and later on they do surgery, most of them stop in the process. While they do it in some stage of the process, they stop. Why do they do that? I read that in an article.
Yes, a number of them it does it. They, especially in teens, there is a process that they say, okay, I don't want to be. I want to be a boy again. You know, and they stop it. But the biggest number of people, especially if they start from a young age, they go all the way. Just to understand what is happening, because we don't have much time, but of course we are going to have number 2 and maybe number 3 of this interview. There is so much material to discuss. United States, when they in these sexual education classes, whatever in gender classes, they used to have a figure like a jelly figure, and they taught them about the gender, sexuality, but it was the biology of that figure. It was a man or a woman, and now they removed that. Now even in England they have, I think they have 10, 15 figures, jelly figures. On one edge is someone who dressed like a cowboy, I think. On the other, or holds plays with trucks. And on the right side there is someone who's holding doors and is pink. And they ask the kids, and each of the, let's call them 10 figures, they have different characteristics. But the 2 binaries are the boy and the girl. And they that's the test they do. That's one of the tests. Okay, so if you point out, oh, I'm in the middle, maybe you say, oh, you are trans. So these are like silly tests that they you know they do in schools, or psychologists do. They're like really stupid stuff. This is actually from the UK. It's happening in the UK. This sort of test. Let me finish. Sorry, it's 8:30 we started.
Yes, I think we have, if we finish at 10, we have still 5 minutes.
Okay.
If anyone.
Yeah, well, teaching kids that a boy can become a girl or a girl can become a boy, it's irresponsible and damaging to a child. That's my opinion. When this happens, there is a serious issue to be dealt with on the side of the parent. So this question of the transgenders, it's not only about the confusion or the gender identity of the child, but it should have been a question of the confusion of the parents. That's my opinion as a psychoanalyst. Okay, maybe we can, keep it like this for today, and we've got the second part.
Yes. Indeed, there is a lot of to discuss on this topic. It's a huge topic.
Okay, well, I can take now maybe 2-3 questions maximum from the public, from the audience, and we can wrap it up. Angele?
Well, Petros, Maria.
Good evening.
Well, this is a subject which really interests me, and I can talk only about my universe because I'm dealing with children and parents. And of course, what you've said, I completely agree with nearly everything. But what I've noticed, and just to confirm that the issue most of the time comes from parents. There is a political issue around the subject,
Yes.
and which is related to globalization, capitalism, etc. But let's leave the politics now aside. However, the parents, the politic has an effect on their position. They don't know where to place themselves, and because they are lost, they just accept anything.
Yes.
And then they feel completely lost, assuming that accepting that a boy or a girl is saying that I'm a boy being a girl or I'm a girl being a boy is assuming a democratic position. And so they are presenting themselves as democratics, as non-racist, as non-sexist,
yes,
etc., etc. So that is one issue. Then the treatments, yes, there are some voices here in the UK that, as a matter of fact, the treatments cannot start at 6 years old, but later on, due to the problems they are facing, because there are problems. There are problems because then the child denies treatment, or they are presenting depression. There are lots of cases of depressions because they start not knowing who they are. There are cases of anorexia because the anorexia, sometimes denying food, gives the child that sense of they are not controlling that sexuality, but at least saying that they don't want to eat is a way to have that sense of control. And there are cases of panic attacks as well. So there are voices now saying that we can't start treatments with 6 years old. Another thing is that parents, and I've been telling to some of them, that the child has their own voice, the development, when they say that a girl wants to say, I want to be a boy, it's a natural process. They have 6, 7 years old. They want to behave like a boy, go up to the trees, run, play with cars, or the boys play with the dollies, etc., etc. Doesn't mean necessarily that they are in a transgender process of etc. Is has to be accepted naturally, because later in life things will appear naturally. So this is one thing that one has to tell them is difficult, as you said, very difficult. There are a lot of things to say, but there is another point that I would like to mention here. I know a case, and there are others, but I know a case where the couple, so the mother and the father, having 3 children between 5 and 12 years, there are 3. The father decided now that he wants to be a woman, and he started wearing women clothes and using makeup. And that has been creating an enormous issue within the couple. The wife is having problems, and the children are completely disturbed, not wanting to go to school. And so there is also this side of the transgender, which is, the adults changing and the affect in children. Another issue that we will start listening in the future is that the schools now are receiving somehow reports to give attention to children in their puberty, 11, 12, 13. They are discovering sexuality, and in that age, they want to have boyfriends, girlfriends, the kiss, giving hands, to be forbidden, because that is considered harassment. So we are going through very difficult times. I could say more things, but I don't want to.
They are already very rich, what you said. Just to add that at 5 years old, what they do is they call it the social transitioning first. And they take the John, they make him in John, they show him into class, they introduce him to the kids, they make sure the kid will approach him as John. So from now on, John is John, and he goes through these years as John. That's the first part of the transitioning, and they try to make it in stages. This is very, very strongly happening in some stages in the United States because of the problems of the century. And they try to create all these long processes until later that they can have surgery. But they allow, as I told you, 15 years old to go for girls to go and remove their breast without the consent of the parent. So this is becoming more and more the standard in those states, which is very sad. Thank you for your information, Maria. It's really, really nice. Anybody else?
Yeah, Petro, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Just one remark, and a bit on the spirit of what Maria said before. I agree with you, it's totally stupid, and it's something which has been really fabricated, this whole gender issue, gender neutral upbringing of children and so on. And I believe it's a way of controlling people through their sexuality. It's a medicalization of sexuality. So even deeper control of people. It's a question of power. It's on a different level, but that's what I've been thinking for a long time now.
Just to say that Elena is a professor of sociology and a psychoanalyst in the University of Cyprus. So she's giving us a different perspective here.
Yeah, but one doesn't exclude the other, huh?
Yes, of course.
It's but it's very scary. It frightens me. But I ask myself, where does this leave the human being? How does a human being subjectify?
But it doesn't. It doesn't
subjectify.
It doesn't exist.
No.
Into this procedure, it doesn't exist.
No, and that's what's so frightening.
Yes.
I mean, sexuality became like something. Yeah, I go to the supermarket, I buy these chewing gums or the other chewing gums, and I just play with it. And
yeah. Well, I believe in the near future we will see a lot of struggles. Already, as I said to you, in Germany and other countries, they voted against a few things, but because it was so well orchestrated and organized by certain groups of people to resemble a human rights movement, there would be a lot of fuss around it the next decade.
But you know that even as we speak in the field of development, I mean, help to developing countries, financial health, know-how, and so on and so forth, they have as a precondition to give the money the acknowledgement of the trans people, etc., and have that incorporated in their legislation and in their human rights codification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their human rights are fine. I mean, as everybody else says, but what is happening with the kids now, that's because this is the issue. This is beyond human rights. I think it's pure violence or, and certain other aspects like, the force of the pronouns and, like 100 genders and goes on. It will not stop.
Cultivating this thing doesn't give a greater freedom to the children or to human beings. I think it reduces their freedom.
Yes, I think so, because the discourse around it, you cannot even speak about it. You cannot even speak because immediately, if you don't say what is expected from you to say, you are labeled racist, transphobic, and immediately the university discourse, it's appearing there. They know all these statistics and they bring it in your face, and something that is, it's actually common sense. It appears to be science. So, and it's not. It's very basic stuff. And there is violence, a lot of violence around it. So that's why I mentioned the word cult earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Petro.
I thank you for your comment.
I have a general point. I mean, I really appreciated your talk, Pedro, and I appreciate particularly that you've given some, let's say, clear, succinct points of reference. For example, with the little boy with several generations of women, where it was possible to see that he's deducing certain meanings and certain implications and certain logic of, going down a particular pathway where you line up, etc. And this is what a psychoanalytic formation makes it possible to access. And in a way, it shows how the everyday human being who doesn't have access to these discrete structures and working with them and being able to say some very simple and clear things which people can agree or disagree with, but you can mark them and you can point, well, this is the kind of logic. You give an example so somebody can think around it. And because this doesn't exist very much, in other words, it's not being spoken, you've just begun speaking it, and hopefully we can cultivate this. People don't have the tools to think with. And the difficulties with the academization of education, my work is involved in universities and I appreciate it a lot. On the other hand, there's a problem with academia in the sense that academia itself defines itself in terms of abstraction. In English, if we say a question is academic, it means it does not have consequences in the real world. In psychoanalysis, we take discourse and we follow the consequences in the real world, in the real life, from the perspective of a particular human being and how it impacts not only the effects on them, but the way in which they respond. And it seems that there's a kind of thought disorder in an academically dominated civilization where practitioners, whether they be teachers, whether they be politicians, whether they be psychologists, whether they be, whatever, are not able to speak, not able to think, do not have, if you like, viable points of reference in a very changing, I think Elena or maybe Maria mentioned globalization, where suddenly we're confronted to so many more variables, and how do we have a compass? And this is also what psychoanalysis fights for, so that each human being develops their own compass by really considering their experience in a profound way with reverence to themselves, and therefore having the ability to have reverence towards others and to be able to give themselves and others the time and the space to make considered decisions and actions. So really, I would really like to see that this is the beginning of opening up these questions, because unless we are humanizing, in the sense we are civilizing ourselves and each other by having, let's say, intelligent, compassionate, profound conversations about what it is to be human, we cannot cultivate a soil that would allow children or adults, and Maria mentioned how parents are lost. Yes, people are lost in a sense. If you're a Lacanian, certainly in my experience, what is it that holds us in a way in some kind of stable position is through having worked through one's traumas. Certainly for me, what holds me as a, if I have a strong position on something, it's somehow the reference points of my traumas, not even whose daughter I was, not even that I'm a woman, not even that I'm this or I'm that, but actually certain things, no to this and yes to that. And you're prepared to put your life on the line. And it's not any particular identification, it's something that comes from the real, okay? In other words, you cannot cross this this threshold, and this other threshold you're prepared to die for. And each human being has to find their bearings in that, because there is no name, no title that can define us. It doesn't matter how many words we use, we still are inexhaustible in that sense. So we have to find our position in our context to be able to say yes and to say no, and to say yes to our desire, and to say no to what we're not sure of, and give ourselves time to navigate so many complexities on so many different levels. So it's not surprising that parents are lost. I would say if I didn't go through what I went through in my life, and with psychoanalysis as well, so the traumas plus the analysis is what gives me a compass. Not anything else, not even that I'm a mother, not even that I'm a grandmother, not even that, you know, my work is this, something else, something beyond all of these words, okay? So one can, at least in this moment, be clear when one is speaking, one is saying this. And maybe tomorrow I'll say something else, but at least I have some way to navigate from one point to the next. At the moment, people are trying to find themselves represented either on TV or on social media or in this discourse or another. And the intellectual discourse is not sufficient. At least what we've made, even, I remember once a conversation with Jacques-Alain back in maybe 2008. He'd come to London, and he kind of was asking me about something. We had an exchange, and he said in France, it was understood that the intellectual would go into a minister's office and bang on the desk. They would say no to something, and they were expected to do that. That was their function. In the UK, you don't do that. In the UK, you're going to say things politely. But it's clear what in a sense, in France, the intellectual was expected to really put himself on the line. We don't have intellectuals in the UK. We have academics. It's not the same thing. To be an academic is actually to abstract and not to put the body on the line, not to put the life on the line. There is no risk associated with the role of the academic. So we don't have intellectuals. Nobody's prepared to take a real risk for their position. They're prepared to persecute, but not to assume a risk on themselves. And this is a problem. Because unless you're prepared to assume a risk of your position, not to accuse others, but to simply state where you are and put yourself in a vulnerable position, then actually your words are not worth anything. And that, from Lacan's point of view, when people asked him what he thought about left-wing and right-wing politicians, he said it was the difference between a fool and a knave, a scoundrel. And for him, the left-wing politician was the fool because there were no consequences to his words. And the right-wing politician was a scoundrel because he did not take account of the consequences of his words upon the other. So really, we can say it's this question of professionals as well, but anyone taking a position, how not to be a fool or a scoundrel.
Thank you, Penny. Okay, I think we should wrap it up here. There are more questions to be answered. There would be part 2 and maybe part 3. There are many things to explore. Just to restate before we close my main argument regarding kids, that I believe that we should approach these matters by investigating, analyzing their conscious and conscious structures around the child and around the parent. And this option is not included in any of the treatments related to gender dysphoria. Actually, this is prohibited because you cannot ask any sort of questions to the child because there are only certain ways to do therapy, like just, basically go along with it. Otherwise, it's considered illegal in most states or countries that they are pro this sort of transitioning. So that's my main statement, and that's why I chose the title "Showing the Faults of American Psychiatry and Psychology." I'm not going to repeat again, but I gave 5, 6, maybe more comments related to that. And that soon will be announced the part 2, because there are like at least 10, 15 questions we have to answer. And I hope to see you there too.